What's good, YouTube? It's Nas, and we back with another video. Road to 200 subscribers, of course, and we just gonna keep going every day. But I was thinking about a video I did, and people don't often talk about how disrespected Tim Duncan is. People think that he wasn't a flashy player just because he wasn't as flashy as all of the other all-time greats. He wasn't dunking on you, he wasn't crossing you. He still got it done, and the casual NBA fan won't know how good really Tim Duncan really was in his career. His numbers don't stand out, but in reality, in my opinion, he's really a top 5 player of all time. Not a lot of people are gonna have the same opinion of Tim Duncan as high as I am, but today we're just gonna get into his stats, and I want to see how y'all feel about Tim Duncan. In his rookie season, 1997 to 1998, Tim Duncan averaged 21 points per game, 12 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 2.5 blocks per game. And throughout this video, Tim Duncan has really never seen a season under 2 blocks per game until he was in his late 30s. And to say that Tim Duncan doesn't have a Defensive Player of the Year is crazy. He might be the best defender without a Defensive Player of the Year, because I know some players that have a Defensive Player of the Year that aren't better than him or aren't a better defender than him. But this season, this was his rookie season. He won Rookie of the Year. He was the first overall pick, and the duo of him and David Robinson was showed the next season when the San Antonio Spurs won their first championship ever in NBA history. He averaged 21.5 points per game, 11.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists to go with 2.5 blocks per game again. And Tim Duncan won Finals MVP his second year. Not a lot of people could say that, or not a lot of people were as good as Tim Duncan was coming out to start the year. Like I just said, he averaged 21, 11, and 2.5 blocks per game. That's evolved as a rookie. And he only played like 3 seasons or 4 seasons in college. I guess that was the normal back then. But really, it was a fight to see who was the best player on the Spurs at that time. They had 2 all-time great power forwards and power forward and center. And we already saw how established David Robinson was when he first came into the NBA. And for Tim Duncan to come into the league and really take over the mantle of the San Antonio Spurs from David Robinson just really showed how good he was. In the 1990-2000 season, Tim Duncan averaged 23 points per game, 12.5 rebounds, and 3 assists, and they didn't get it done. I believe they lost to the Los Angeles Lakers this season, but it's not a lot of times I'm gonna say Tim Duncan has lost in the playoffs, because Tim Duncan was a winner, and we know him today as a winner. But in the 2000-2001 season, Tim Duncan averaged 22 points per game, 12 rebounds, and 3 assists. And this was not his best season, but we're going to get to his best season sooner than later. And then, sooner than later, let me not say that, because the next season is his MVP season, when he averaged 25.5 points per game, basically 13 rebounds, and basically 4 assists. And from the stats I'm looking at, Tim Duncan was an underrated playmaker, but we all know that the offense revolved around him, and they didn't get it done these couple seasons. But the next season, where he won MVP again, and the San Antonio Spurs won their second ever championship, he averaged 23 points per game, 13 rebounds, and 4 assists again. And this is when the mantle of the Lakers the downfall was happening. Kobe and Shaq weren't getting along, and we obviously saw Tim Duncan in his second season get it done. And once that dynasty was over, Tim Duncan took the ranks back as the best player in the West. Basically, you could debate that he was the best player in the West. Not a lot of people, just because he is a flashy player doesn't mean he wasn't the best in the world. People are going to think that Kobe was better. Who else was in the West? Dirk. We already know Tim Duncan's better than Dirk, though. But in the 2003-2004 season, Tim Duncan averaged 22 points per game, 12.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. And we know the Spurs are not going to win every year, but in the next season, they came back and won again. They averaged 20 points per game, 11 rebounds, and basically 2.5 assists. And this was the season where Manu and Tony Parker were on the rise, because before they weren't really existent. It was Tim Duncan dominating, Tim Duncan carrying the Spurs, until Tim Duncan got some actual help, because David Robinson was already retired, long gone by this time. People think that Tim Duncan really just had help his whole life or his whole career, but that's really not the truth. Tim Duncan just played the right way and played into the system that was given to him, and we saw how good that worked out for him. But Tim Duncan, not to say Tim Duncan didn't have losing seasons, but he really never did. Because if you want to count that him losing in the playoffs, okay. But a few years ago, I read a stat that a couple years ago, the Spurs missed the playoffs for the first time, or had a losing record for the first time since 1999. And guess when Tim Duncan was drafted? 1997. So, yeah. I don't know. In the 2005-2006 season, Tim Duncan averaged 18.5 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists. We're going to see the numbers start to drop off in these upcoming seasons. The 2006-2007 season, Tim Duncan averaged 20 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. In the 2007-2008 season, Tim Duncan averaged 19.5 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. 2008-2009 season, Tim Duncan averaged 19.5 points per game, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists. Again, we see the playmaking numbers start to pile on. Then his last season, averaging above 15 points, I would say he averaged 18 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. And Tim Duncan's numbers started to drop off, but not really, because we all know that the Spurs end up winning another ring. Granted that he didn't have 2 more Finals MVP, because the Finals MVP went to Tony Parker and Kawhi Leonard, but he was still a major factor, and he was one of the most impactful players at the age of 37, 38. And not a lot of people could say that they could sustain Tim Duncan's longevity. His longevity is underrated, because we see how LeBron played, we see how Kobe played, but not a lot of people talk about Tim Duncan's longevity, which is a crazy thing to say. But in the seasons, throughout his career, Tim Duncan's blocks numbers speak for themselves. He averaged 2.5 his first season, 2.5 his second season, 2 blocks his third season, 2 his fourth season, 2.5, 2, basically 3, 2.5, 2. 2.5, 2, 2.5, 2, 1.5, 1.5, 2, 1.5, 2.5, 2, 2, and then his last season he still averaged a block. So Tim Duncan was one of the best defenders, like I just said, and it's crazy. I'm gonna keep saying it's crazy that he's never won a Defensive Player of the Year. Somebody got to rewrite history or something to get him one, but Tim Duncan's accolades speak for themselves. He's a 5-time NBA champion. He's a 2-time MVP. He's an NBA Finals MVP 3 times. He's a 15-time All-Star Game MVP in 2000. 15-time All-NBA selection, tied for the most all time. He was a 15 All-NBA defensive team, even though he doesn't have one. And he was the 1998 Rookie of the Year. And Tim Duncan is the all-time leader in Spurs points. But I want to know, where do y'all rank Tim Duncan, and how do y'all feel about him? Let me know down below. Subscribe.